Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases. Hello, everyone. Glad you're able to join us tonight. If you're new to the channel, welcome. What happens, we'll have a presentation tonight. And while we're having the presentation and you're in chat, be respectful of families, the mods, and each other, and enjoy your time here tonight. Tonight, we're going to be talking about Kohberger and some of the evidence and how I look at that evidence and what does it mean and how do we weigh it from my perspective. And of course, I look forward to hearing your perspective in the comments and everything. And do you got anything that's going on right now? All right. Yep. So anyway, I have a interesting visual aid tonight that I worked on, and so it's hope y'all appreciate it. And
I can't wait.
I know it. I told her about it, and she says cluttered because I explained it's kind of cluttered. So just bear with us, and I appreciate everyone being here tonight, and we'll get into it now. If you have any information about this case of who is involved in the homicides of Madison, Kaylee, Ethan, or Zana, absolutely make sure law enforcement has it and that the prosecution has it so that we can have justice on this case. Kohberger is the one that's currently accused of it. Of course, he hasn't been convicted yet. And so a lot of people ask me, which way do I, and almost every show when we talk about it, of that I pretty well think it's one way or the other. And I go under the probable cause that, yes, absolutely, there is enough probable cause to arrest him. And I think there's more than enough to get a conviction on him also. And that's why part of this show and the reason of this show tonight is looking at how I weigh this stuff. And hopefully you'll find it revealing, and we'll see what you think about it. But anyway, we know early on in the investigation that law enforcement was looking for this Elantra. They had a certain year model. Of course, the year model was off by a few years once they finally identified who the suspect is, of course, was Kohberger. But during the early days, they were looking for this Elantra. And there's a lot of people out there, and I want you to think about your own families, your friends, your neighbors, even you, that you may own such a vehicle. And there's so many different ways that you can visualize what we're going to be talking about as I create this, that either put yourself in as a victim of something or just as this is a suspect, and think about how many people own Elantras out there. And across the United States, thousands and thousands and thousands of these vehicles are sold. They're very popular. And even with the college crowd, they're very popular. And so it's not uncommon for any individual. I'm sure almost everyone knows somebody owns a vehicle like this. And maybe even the exact same year that was involved in this case. But once they found the vehicle, and then, of course, they went through the files and they started identifying individuals that were the owners that were registered within that community, of course, there's a name that comes up. And, of course, that name, of course, is Kohberger. But there's something very particular about that law enforcement knew way before we did, that not only are they looking for this Elantra, but they're looking for a Elantra that's occupied by a certain type of individual. And now I want all of you to think about the friends of y'all that went out there and looked at it and thought about people that you might know that own a vehicle such as this. that regardless if you know them or how well you know them, how many of them have bushy eyebrows? And so instantly you're going to take out a lot of the people that you may be thinking of. And is bushy eyebrows a really great descriptor of any human? No, but every individual is made up, and it was enough that even in the darkness of that night, that the witness who saw this offender pass by just within feet of her made note of those bushy eyebrows. And so, as law enforcement was looking through all their owners of the Elantras, and they noted that, oh, well, let's pull over to the side all the owners with bushy eyebrows that are male and otherwise, or whatever descriptors they had of it, and of approximate height, weight, and things that the witness would have told law enforcement. And so it would have started narrowing the field. And so as law enforcement weighs it, I go right along with them. I understand absolutely why they would identify such an individual as this on something just so minor as the bushy eyebrows, the physique, have an understanding of even from some of the other evidence of shoe size and whatever the descriptors that the witness would have told them about at the time. So once they've identified an individual and they have a vehicle that we, like I said, you start sorting through and you see that narrows the field within the orbit of the people that you know. And it would have done the same within this community. Then we have that this vehicle was in the area at the time, specific time, because law enforcement knew, and that's how come they brought out that this vehicle was a suspected vehicle and was suspicious in nature due to its proximity, the time spent in the area of where the crime went, and who would own a vehicle such as that. And of course, they got this narrow field, and it's not just a vehicle that drove past one time. It's not even a vehicle that went and visited a friend down the street and turned around, spent a few minutes, left the area. We have where this vehicle circled that neighborhood numerous times. And so that's why law enforcement felt so compelled towards this vehicle that they identified it as it was suspicious, and that the occupants were someone that they wanted to absolutely make sure that they spoke with. And so as we weigh the evidence, we start seeing more and more of the weight going towards this vehicle. For the fact, like I said, just because you own this vehicle means nothing. But when you have a vehicle that is extremely suspicious in nature by whatever acts it's committing or doing at the time, and on a lot of stakeouts throughout my career, that when we were out there in the middle of the night and we saw a vehicle pass by 2 or 3 times, regardless if it was a business where we were having armed robberies, or a business or a residential area where we were having burglaries, thefts, or whatever, of course, it draws our attention to that vehicle, because we know that human nature and that these suspects approach these things in a very organized manner for the fact that they don't want to get caught. They're scouting out the area. They're looking around, making sure everything looks the same and as they thought it would look, and making sure that everything's in order. We don't have witnesses out in certain areas. And so they follow a lot of the same mannerisms, regardless of the type of crime that they committed. It's just human nature. Then we have to look at that. Okay, now that they've identified an individual, and we have this information. Now, later on, we find out that through their search warrants and things, that we're looking at this one individual, and we're looking at layers. That we have an owner of Elantra. He has some physical similarities to what the witness saw. We have that his vehicle was in the area at the, you know, acting very suspicious, or a vehicle similar to his. And through their research and through the um, search warrants and gathering of evidence, we find out that this individual has purchased um, a knife, and law enforcement has already knew within their files what type of knife that they're looking for specifically. And through those specific type of knives, they found out that there is this individual who owns a car that matches description of being suspicious in the area, and that we have this vehicle, plus now we have this knife that is consistent with what law enforcement understands that caused the injuries to the victim. And so, if you think within your orbit of friends and or suspects, how many people, you start narrowing the field, that if they don't have bushy eyebrows, and now how many people would have bought this knife or has this knife that also owns this vehicle? And of course, people are going to argue, well, there's a lot of them. Yeah, there are a lot of people that may own a Elantra that also may own a K-bar. But like I said, we're early on, and law enforcement's looking at this, and they're having layers. And when we get to finish all these layers out, you're going to see where I'm going with and what I'm talking about of why the probable cause and the circumstantial evidence, in my opinion, is huge. It's just not that, that we only look at one piece of evidence at a time, because mathematically we have to put each of these things together. And what are the odds that as we layer up these things, that it all points towards one individual, and that you can take almost any of these other one-off things that, okay, even if we took the knife away from it right then, that we don't have any evidence that he owned one, or or whatever, we still have the other three other elements at this point. So now we go into the probable cause affidavit, and we try to learn some more information, and we find that, not only has this individual purchased such a knife, and it's in his history, but on the knife that similar to what he has purchased, his DNA profile is on a sheath, which is left at the scene. Yet another one of those nails in the coffin that says, yes, we have to look at this individual heavily, and we're building that probable cause, not only for the search warrant, but for the arrest and also for the conviction. Because we know from where science has brought us today in the CSI world of DNA, and where we're headed, which we're nowhere as far along as what we're going to be in 10 or 15 years. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal of the progress that will be made as science continues to improve our crime scene processing and everything that we can um, appreciate about how law enforcement approaches these cases. And so now we're already at 5 different layers of what is pointing towards a single individual. And so now we're starting to get up there, even higher numbers, that we can, just by the DNA process itself, that we can eliminate a vast number of people. At the end of this, or after some of this visual aids, I have some of the numbers on the DNA, for the fact that uh, uh, DNA profiles are so huge and the numbers are so vast. It's beyond anything that I, as an individual, truly understand and can comprehend. That's where those experts come in and are able to look at those numbers and tell you. And that's how come we rely upon them, that these experts, one expert in one part of the world can look at a DNA profile and say, yes, that belongs to him. Another expert from a different part of the world can look at that same DNA profile and say, yes, it belongs to him. And so it's science. It's something that the experts can agree on, that if everything is handled properly and the processes are followed, yes, individual is an individual. Now we have to look at another layer that we can look at it, that this individual that owns this vehicle, that a vehicle matching the description of was seen multiple times within the area, that his cell phone data not only shows that he has been in that area on numerous occasions. And then you may think about, if you're looking at your house and your friends that may come and visit you that may match some of this description, and how often they come by, and they may not stop. They may just be driving by or going to visit a friend in the area. And so by itself, the cell data means nothing. But when you look at what times it was and what was the possibility, and looking at the cell data, that where was he going? Who did he visit in that area? Did he just drive by? Where did he park? You see, we don't know all the information currently of all that cell data. Law enforcement are going to be able to ping it and locate it and bring it down to a much finer detail of what the opportunities and what was he doing, how long did he spend in the area, did he do drive-bys during on certain streets, what was his travels on each of those occasions, and visiting 12 times or more that he was in this one area. And like I said, you can take that away from it, and just by itself, it means nothing. But we have this one individual that currently has these 6 things that are pointing towards a single individual, and with a connection of these victims. Then we have, whereas on at least one occasion, this individual with the bushy eyebrows that has a DNA on the knife of similar to what he had purchased in the past and owns a vehicle, had connected on these victims' Wi-Fi at least one occasion. Now, are there going to be others? Or are there going to be other Wi-Fis that he connected not only on this one, but in other parts of the community in that location? And it may be so, and law enforcement will look at that. But we know from what has been released, that was in the papers and everything else, that we have another layer that we have to put on, pointing towards a single individual. And so the probable cause for the arrest is, just on this alone, if you didn't go any further, this right here is more than enough for a arrest warrant. And probably not even, once you had the DNA on the sheath, if it can't be explained away, and law enforcement, they would have weighed it and spoke to the judge and the prosecutors. And I'm sure at some point they said, yep, we got it. But they put a lot of different things in that probable cause. And so, which paints this picture. And so now we go further on the alibi. That, yes, is an alibi absolutely necessary? No. But most people, that when we look at them from the law enforcement perspective, that we'll look at that alibi, and we find that by looking at all the cell data, not only from previous times he was in the area, but on the night of, the one night that the crimes were committed. And does this individual have an alibi? We know now currently from what the defense has said that no, he doesn't have one, other than he goes out and rides by himself in these areas, which of course law enforcement's not going to pay any attention to that part of it. Now, if he said that, yes, this is exactly where I was at, who I was with, of course, they would give that great weight. But for the fact that there's none, then of course the alibi will be meaningless to the law enforcement perspective of it, that all the other data says it's point to this one person. And this one person currently doesn't have anyone that says he was with me, or I sold him a drink, I sold him a Snickers bar at that time, he was across town. We don't have any of that. And so, which is huge, that when we don't have all the or any type of alibi, that it's another layer of circumstantial evidence that when you add it on with the others, that yes, it's uh, there is a possibility that this one person is responsible for this crime. And like I said, there's no need that if he had an alibi or he didn't have an alibi, doesn't mean anything, because there's a lot of people throughout the country that can be sleeping in their home, middle of the night, and has absolutely no alibi of where they're at any particular moment in time. But we know for a fact that he's on the road during this particular time, and he doesn't have an alibi of elsewhere. And he complicates this matter due to certain things that he did with his cell phone, of taking it off, disconnecting, airplane, whatever the method was of going off the grid and taking care of that. We won't have an alibi, has put this individual in the focus and the crosshairs of law enforcement. Now we have to go and look at, there's a map that when you look at the mapping of his movements that night, that from the time when his phone went off the air to the time that his phone came back on the air, on the grid, that the crime scene is located between these two known points. And so not only does he not have an alibi for this situation and for this critical time period, but the crime scene itself is between these 2 points. So he had to drive past in this vehicle that is, or in a vehicle similar to the one that is seen being acting suspicious within the community and the neighborhood of where the crime was committed. And like I said, it's just another one of those layers of how many people out there. Were there a lot of other people on the roads that night during this specific time inside this town? Absolutely. You know, there's dozens and dozens of cars, hundreds of cars that's probably on the road at any one moment within this community. But how many of them match the description of this Elantra being in the area, being driven by someone with bushy eyebrows that owns a K-bar, that has DNA that matches this individual, with cell phone data of being in the area before, having connected to the Wi-Fi, and he's in the area, and at some point he drives past this residence. And of course, people will say, well, just because he drove past doesn't mean he's guilty. No, it doesn't. But when you start looking at all the other circumstantial evidence, it is great weight that, yes, there's something going on here. Then we have to say that the time frame, that of all nights and all times, that yes, he could have driven past that house numerous times, but at the one moment in time of where all the stars align, that this crime is committed, that during this exact time period, his phone is off the air. His vehicle, which matches the description of the multiple cameras captures of a vehicle similar to his, is seen in the area during this crucial time. And he owns a knife. His DNA is on that sheath. He has the bushy eyebrows that the witness says. And like I said, we don't have all the information of other details that the witness proclaimed about the offender. And we have it where he connected with the Wi-Fi. And so when you look at this cluster of small bits of circumstantial evidence that all point to one individual, that's how come we have to look at him as, yes, this is an individual that absolutely there's reasons to arrest, there's reasons to bring him to trial, there's reasons to try to get justice for these victims, due to the fact that, and this is just what out of this one probable cause affidavit. Are there other tidbits of information out there? Yes, law enforcement, I'm sure, has more. And the DNA profiles and everything else that may come up, the hair, the fiber, and other things that may come forth or become knowledge in the future, we just don't know right now. But just from this one visual aid here that is so critical. And of course, the largest piece of evidence is this DNA on this sheath. And so when I was looking at the DNA, and by no means am I a DNA expert on any of that, I relied totally upon the experts to say, yes, this is that person. And because I don't understand how they read the markers or what makes each of those markers unique and everything. I don't know all the verbiage that they use, but upon looking at some of the DNA that all of us, Mrs. Steve and I, that our DNA is 99.9% absolutely the same. All from one human to another, we share 99.9% of this DNA. There's only a tenth of 1% difference of between individuals, and of course they look at those profiles and they're able to tell. But I looking at this, and when I did some research, the human genome has 3.2 billion base pairs, which is, what is 3.2 billion base pairs? Other than it's a huge number. And I was thinking, well, what is 3.2 billion pairs? And then we look at what is 1/10 of 1%. What is that number of what is different between Mrs. Steve and I? There's a lot of differences.
There's lots. Let me answer that one. There's lots.
Well, I wanted to see if this was a pretty well a known base number, 3.2. What is the number that it would be? And so I put it on a calculator, and of all the variables, and I'm sure that there's multipliers and variables and how they look at this, that still came up with 3.2 million different things between Mrs. Steve and I, and our neighbors and anyone else in the world. That whatever how they look at these things, they compare them, the uniqueness, and what factors are in there, and that's just this one number. So when we look at 3.2 million, that's a pretty huge number in and of itself. And so with that number in mind, I said, okay, 3.2 million possible differences. How many people are in this community that we get to select from, that each of these humans with 3.2 million differences between one human and another? And so we look at how many cars it could be by automakers, and we only see that there's 100,000 different car types out there. And how many people would own a Elantra that was from that community and from that area? And so, we're nowhere near the 3.2. And so when you start pulling in these numbers and you start pulling in the population of what the census says, that we have 34,000 people in one community. We're from Washington, and you have from Moscow, you have 25,000. That we're still nowhere near by the time you bring in all this other information. And I was just looking at the demographics of the area, and then there's only within Moscow there's 10,000 residences, and so there's nowhere near enough numbers of individuals within that community to ever outweigh the relationships of that 3.2 million differences between any two humans. And so, and that's just the way I was looking at it. I hope that makes sense to y'all. I don't know if it does or not, but it is something for me.
That doesn't mean anything. I know how you think. So.
Yeah, she knows how I think. But anyway, that's what I was trying to get out there, is that when we look at all this information, everything pretty well, in my mind, absolutely, I go along with what law enforcement says of why they're focused on this individual and all this critical information. And I hope this visual aid helps you in that. All right. We got any questions?
Yep.
All right.
We're going to start with a blue light. And it is for Brenda B. gifting a membership tonight.
Thank you.
We
Appreciate your support.
appreciate that.
Absolutely.
All right, now let me get over here. Okay, and this here is from Nan. Do you think he was pulled over twice or even once as a way of tracking him to see what was going on and how he'd react?
I do. I actually do. I think that he was on the radar early on, and I believe that the was those encounters, which of course law enforcement is denying that those encounters were anything that they orchestrated. That doesn't mean that there wasn't other tracking teams. As we saw, and even I spoke of in my last show, that we see these individuals leaving that residence late at night, and these plainclothes individuals that are not what you typically would think of as the CSI. I've worked a lot of crime scenes, and I've never yet seen anyone working CSI wear a cowboy hat. It's possible, but not in this region, not in Georgia. But and I think it was probably part of a tracking team that by that time they had an individual, because Kohberger's vehicle had popped on the radar by late November. Those individuals leaving the apartment that night was in December. And so I think that there may have been multiple teams and multiple suspects at that moment, but I think they were narrowing their scope and focus more towards certain individuals. And of course, this individual, because there's so much that pointed towards him.
All right, and blue light for Courtney. She became a YouTube member tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And for everyone on members, we have on Sunday night every week, all the members around 7 o'clock, the members come on, and I sit down and we spend some time together and I answer all your questions. And then on Wednesday we have different tiers, and we have the higher the tier on the Wednesday nights, or we dedicate to our members on those.
All right. And from Anna, in the beginning, news said the FBI wanted to keep secret the system they used with the DNA that yielded BK's dad. Now defense is fighting to get that information. What's the FBI secret?
They're talking about was, proper procedures, and did they do and follow the protocols and adhere to all the rules. This is such a new thing of what they're doing with this type of genealogical DNA profiling things. And at some point, all of this is going to get clarified. Do I think that the defense should be getting this information? Absolutely. To make sure, if they used it, they did it, whatever, let's put it out there. I don't think that they should be keeping any secrets, and I'm pretty sure at some point the courts will make sure that there's no secrets kept. And so they're walking, the prosecution, the FBI, and all of them are which it's not really the FBI at this point. It would be the, unless FBI has certain attorneys working with them, protecting certain data fields and things that would be interfering. But the courts will clarify that. Is it an FBI secret? No, I don't expect it is, but I do think that he should be given every benefit of the doubt of every piece of evidence, because we don't want it overturned. And because that's what the defense will do, is that, if we'd had this information, we could have presented this. So I think all that's going to come out.
All right. And from Lori, just tuned in. Can anyone tell me where the knife purchase comes from?
I believe it was on Amazon. If I ain't mistaken, I think there was a receipt or something that the knife was purchased on Amazon about 7 months, going from memory. I think it was like 7 months prior. And so, and owning the knife by itself means nothing. Um, owning the knife and owning a Elantra probably means nothing by itself. But owning a knife that has the DNA that's found under a victim, that starts stacking up there. And that this owner doesn't have an alibi. This owner was out traveling the roads at that time of night, and his phone goes off on one side of the map of where the crime scene was and activates on the other side during that critical time frame of when the homicides occur. That's is what is the huge part.
Oh, sorry.
Mrs. Steve's sidetracked there. No,
No, I'm
she's
just
working. She's multitasking.
trying to catch up.
She's multitasking.
All right, let's see here. And from 63 Clocks, Steve, do you anticipate additional evidence against the defendant coming out at trial? If so, what would you think it would be?
Oh, I think that they're going to have more camera information, absolutely. And I think that we'll have a lot more of the cell data. And let's see, what else would there be? And hopefully by that time, if there is other DNA, that will become. Now the defense will have it absolutely, and we'll be waiting and loaded for bear. They're going to have it far prior to our knowledge. I mean, they're not going to have those Perry Mason moments where they just flip out the picture of, here you are, changing clothes. They're not going to have those Perry Mason moments because discovery will ensure that there's not that type of surprises within the courts. And to have that shock value on juries and also on the clients and things. So, but I'm hoping that by the time that the DNA lab reports are out there, that comes up. But absolutely, the cell information I believe will be there.
All right, we got to do some blue lights here. We've got Gail gifted a membership.
Thank you, Gail. Appreciate that.
And I'm going to try to get caught up here. And Mike D gets the blue light.
Says, in my opinion, we don't know the weapon, an edge weapon, but nothing found aside from the sheath. Your thoughts? I think they have a lot of information about that weapon. Having been at crime scenes where knives were used and homicides occurred from those weapons, those edge weapons, that the wound track tells you a lot about that weapon. It'll give you linked to certain areas. They can be bruising on the skin of if this weapon was used in certain ways, and of when it contacted, if it was driven in, and it's used, and and you can have profiles that once this instrument has contact with body fluids such as blood and otherwise, that you can have transfers and of images of what that edge weapon may look like. So I think that they're going to have that, not only with that knife, just by the presence of the sheath, that they would say, yes, a knife that would fit in this sheath, built in this type of format, because it's a well-known type of weapon that has certain characteristics, that they would look at those wound channels and everything. And if there is any type of blood stain transfers with outlines and identifiable characteristics of the edges or the back of the weapon or whatever, that they would say, yes, that matches such a weapon that would come from such a sheath. And everything goes along those lines.
Okay. All right. Now I have another Elizabeth.
Thank you. I appreciate you being a member for us for 2 months. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow.
All right, multitasking. Okay. And let's see here. From Happy Wife, are there any other white Elantras driving around the area on camera?
Probably so. And would law enforcement have tracked those? Absolutely. Um, and uh, but that's where all the other stuff piles up, because how many of those other white Elantras driving around the area has this other critical information of being driven by an individual that matches a description from inside the house, that has purchased a weapon, that the DNA is on that. Yes, there's probably, because looking at it, Elantra is a very common vehicle. And, even the different lighter shades of it can be confused. But they're looking for a certain time frame and everything, and that has the cell data that shows what it shows about the critical information of being turned off, turned on, and the mapping of on each side of the crime scene. And but no, it wouldn't surprise me that law enforcement doesn't have other white Elantras on some cameras near the area. Maybe a mile, it may be 500 yards, or it may be 10 miles away, but law enforcement would be looking at them.
All right. And another one popped in here from Elizabeth.
Is there any other or any further information that might tie Kohberger to the young lady whose car was trifled through and the animal harmed before these homicides? Um, you know, I don't. I remember the reports of, but law enforcement will look at those key dates and times that those items or these incidents occurred, and they would be looking at that. Okay, Kohberger already says that yes, I go out and I ride around by myself late at night. So he's already put himself in the unfavorable position that yes, I could have been out trifling through someone's vehicle during those times, and law enforcement would try to look at and see where he was at. And if it's by chance he didn't turn his phone off, and they know some key times of when either the animal was hurt or when that vehicle was gone through, that they would be able to say that, oh, he's definitely not connected to this, for the fact that we have him while he was out that night, or he's at home that night, uh, and we have his phone showing and his devices being active elsewhere. And we just don't know that. But I do believe that law enforcement would look at that, and they would absolutely know that, for the fact that the vehicle that was going through was relatively close.
Okay. I gotta go down here and find that. And this is pretty cool. Look here. Tony, look where he's from.
Sweden is in the house. Excellent.
That is incredible.
Thank you. Appreciate your donation also, sir. That'll help us. We're going out on the road in just a couple of weeks.
All right. All right. And from ZP Zap, does anyone know when is this trial? I'm so anxious.
I think the speedy thing is for October schedule. Do I think it's going to go in October? I would be surprised, shocked, and otherwise, because we're still arguing about they don't have all the evidence. And so, here we are this late in the game, and, we're less than 60 days out, and I don't see that happening.
Ruckus is in the chat.
Hello, Ruckus. What you doing? What category on the Ruckus scale are you causing tonight? What level are you at?
All right. And from Lori, I believe the Amazon purchase of knife linking to BK was from anonymous source, was released on Dateline and also mentioned on Daily Mail. Just wonder if LE or prosecutor ever confirmed this.
I don't know. I was relying upon those, and I know that they took a lot of knives that were listed on the search warrant, and they were looking, and they were paying a lot of attention through those searches for these knives, and so they absolutely were attempting to link him to this regardless.
Okay. And happy wife, does that knife have a serrated tip?
I don't know on the back of it if it's serrated or not. Some of the Rambo type knives, but law enforcement would be able to look at some of the injuries and see which type of injuries in that wound channel, because anything that has, there's certain characteristics of all these different manufacturers of how they will make certain knives. Now, the K bar itself, is it specifically, and it doesn't have certain things? I don't know of which one that they're looking at. And from the wound characteristics, would they be able to tell? Yes. I don't know which one of the K bars that they're looking at. So I don't know.
Okay.
Law enforcement knows. I just don't know.
And from Debbie, Mr. Steve, did they find shoe prints and did they collect all his shoes?
We know that they reference a certain style shoe in the search in one of the probable cause affidavits. And so from that, and that's why Mrs. Steve did the runway walk and did the bloodstained transfer shoe prints to see how far that you could track and how far it would be able to be tracked on certain shoe prints. And so they made reference to it. And so we know that at least one shoe print was analyzed. And I'm almost sure, and I think in one of the search warrants in Pennsylvania, that his shoes, boots, or whatever were taken, and they would try to find all of them. Does that mean that they got the ones that, if he was and is the one that committed these crimes, do they have his shoes that possibly, if he was wearing them, do they have those? I don't know. I would expect not. If he's anywhere as crafty as I think he is, he wouldn't have anything in his possession or could ever be connected to him in his possession at any time. I think all that would be gone.
All right. And you want an off topic or you want me to save it?
No, we go. You go.
All right, this is off. Miranda Lee at True Crime Web. Do you have any news or updates on any of the cases you've covered? I keep hoping for an arrest.
Yes, Miranda. No, I don't have anything right now. I've got to get with Chris. Other than that, we're going back out on the road, and I've got to go to Indiana in a couple of weeks and speak on one of the cold cases. And I've just met with another family, last week on a cold case. So, no, I don't have anything, but I'm like you. I'm hoping for arrest on any and all of them. And any information we get and come across, we tip it in.
Yep, absolutely. All right. And from Dave, Steve, have you heard anything more on the footprint?
No, hopefully we will, but no, we don't have any information. And, if there is, and if he did make a mistake and tried to clean shoes, I think that would be huge. And if there is that DNA profile within any of that shoe print, that would be something that would be used in court. I just haven't heard anything.
All right. And blue light from Shelley.
Okay. Shoe print left on driver's side of her car. That must be on the one where the trifle through the vehicle is what she's talking about. Okay. No, I didn't know about that. I had missed that part. I knew that a vehicle had been gone through in the neighborhood, but I did not know it was that there was another shoe print left. That's interesting.
All right. And from Miranda, Do you think any of the victims might have survived if EMS and police had been called right away and not 12 hours later?
That'll be answered in court. I would suspect probably, if there's a surgical team um, there on the scene, you can speculate all you want about uh, what injuries can, because throughout history, there's been some individuals that should not have survived. And there's no reason of why certain individuals survive at certain times under certain conditions. So I can't cast about something I don't know, but the medical examiner and the pathologist, when we're in court and they're up there testifying, they may clarify that this injury was non-survivable and the victim would have been uh, unconscious and unrecoverable within whatever time frame. So anything I could speculate on that would just be pure speculation, and I have no idea because every human out there, some people can take great uh, amount of injuries and damage and survive it, and some people can have some minor um, injury and succumb to it and pass away. I mean, it happens. It's absolutely amazing how certain individuals will just succumb to their injuries and others won't. But I have no idea about this.
Okay. And this is from 63 Clocks at True Crime Web, off topic. Sending Steve and Chris positive energy as they take a look at Dior Kuntz's case.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I got some more equipment in on that case today. Still
big box.
Got a big box today. Getting ready, trying to get out there. Going to be facing a lot of different obstacles up in the mountains out in Idaho.
All right. That's all your questions.
That's all my questions. Anything else? All right.
No, let me look.
She's going to scan through right quick. But I want to thank everyone for being here tonight and appreciate. And like I said, I created this visual aid for the fact of trying to weigh and look at why I believe that the probable cause is strong, and that this is why we're going to court on this, and that even on this alone, the circumstantial, that any one thing standing by itself is not huge. But other than the DNA is huge. But the other stuff that when you layer it on there, that yes, that time frame, the phone being off each side of the crime scene, the cell data, the visitations prior, checking in on the Wi-Fi, his being owning a knife that is consistent with what I believe would be the injuries, and matching the description, owning the vehicle that's suspicious in the area. That when you look at all that, yeah, I think they got the guy.
All right.
Don't mean they got him, but I think it is. That's just my opinion.
All right. I got two more for you.
Okay.
Frank Meister's in the house.
Hello, Frank.
All right. And uh-oh, it didn't star. Hold on.
Uh-oh.
Okay, I got a blue light for Olivia. 2 memberships donated.
Thank you, Olivia. Appreciate that.
And
awesome.
From Lori, I can't understand the sheath next or under 2 victims' severe wounds and blood loss having a single source DNA. Would you not expect blood all over that sheath also?
And now that may be. There may be a massive amount, but we also, that this one part of it, because that DNA profile may not have been mixed. And so you could have on this sheath several single source DNA profiles. Or you could have where there's a mixture. But the way I read it and the way I understand it was that, yes, and do I expect that there is other DNA on that sheath? I would expect so. But they were looking at the one unidentified DNA profile that came from a single source. But now that's just the way I read it. And you may be correct that there's, and if there's not anymore, I would find that shocking. But I do expect that that's what I believe they meant. All right. Is that it?
That is it.
All right, guys. I want to appreciate everybody being here tonight. Thank y'all for being here. Appreciate all the support. We're getting
Awesome.
ready. Yep. We're getting ready to head out again.
Awesome mods.
Absolutely. And y'all stay safe out there. And I'll see our members tomorrow evening. And probably see most of y'all morning watch Sunday night, Monday morning.
All right. Take care.
Stay
Love
safe,
y'all.
guys.